It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and a particularly hectic one. Everybody wants everything done right now, or earlier if possible, with Kira caught in the middle of it. Snapping at Bashir is the final straw, and he decides she needs some downtime. He leaves her in Quarks with an array of distractions and orders her to enjoy herself. The option is taken out of her hands somewhat when Will Riker, the USS Enterprise's very own testosterone torpedo, appears from nowhere and decides to join her. The following morning he calls in to see Sisko as a courtesy. He's only here for some leave, but it doesn't hurt to make your presence known. It also serves as an excuse for Dax and Kira to have a chat about him, and we learn they spent the night talking in Quarks. Kira clarifies it's nothing more, as she's already bagged herself a Vedek back on Bajor, but she's certainly paying more attention than she would for other visitors to Ops. Riker leaves the office and is greeted by Dax on the way, though he briefly struggles to remember meeting her on his last visit when they gambled together. Maybe Quark fiddles with the drinks to make people lose more money at the tables, and that affected his memory. He bumps into Kira again on the promenade, quite literally, and Kira offers him a tour of the station. He gladly accepts, and wonders if it could include the super-secret experimental starship that we've got docked here. I suppose it's difficult to keep quiet when it's sticking out of the side of the station. At least they put 2 locks and a guard on the dock. That the lock is set up to accept anybody from Starfleet rather than specifically assigned people with a reason to be here feels like an oversight, but I'm sure Eddington knows what he's doing. Kira and Riker interrupt O'Brien, who is getting a little extra work in. Odd thing, though, Riker refuses to speak to him and says he knows the reason why. O'Brien is clearly thrown by the response but leaves anyway, and Riker tells Kira it's a long story when she asks. We've had the good sense to lock the controls so people can't just fly off with the damn thing, though Kira unlocks them when Riker says he wants to see the screens. She receives some yellow poop as a thank you, and Riker fiddles with the controls to let some newcomers teleport in and join him. Up in Ops, we're getting alarms, not from the gunfire, which you'd expect them to be running a constant scan for in a restricted area, but because the Defiant is registering an overload. A call from Riker tells Sisko there's been a bit of a kaboom. Kira's hurt, but more importantly, the ship is about to go bang, so we need to undock it so it doesn't damage the station. If anybody's wondering how Riker would be able to move it when the controls were supposed to be locked, they don't mention it, and we open the clamps. Cue Riker sticking the shields up and legging it, leaving some very serious questions behind him. We'll add them to the ones we're given on the Defiant when Riker tears off his sideburns and one of his companions calls him Tom. It's time for answers, with Odo and Sisko explaining to Gul Dukat, who's here for some reason. Back on an old episode of TNG, serial sex pest Will Riker had a teleporter oopsie that made a copy of him. The copy, or possibly the original, was found a few years later on the planet that he was teleporting off when it happened. This lad goes by the middle name of Tom to distinguish himself, and, as there's no rule against it, Starfleet decided to let him be backup Riker on a different ship. The reason we're explaining this to Dukat is because Starfleet thinks Tommy Riker has gone and joined the Marquis. Him being a perfect genetic copy of Will gave him all the biometric gubbins he needed to pretend to be him and access the Defiant, a pretense that seems a bit redundant if he was in Starfleet too, but let's ignore that for now. All of which doesn't really interest Dukat. All he cares about is how his bosses will treat a frankly far-fetched story and the resulting assumption that Starfleet did all this on purpose to arm the Marquis. That's why Sisko is going back to Cardassian with him. He was involved in designing the Defiant, so knows its weaknesses, and Dukat's price for avoiding a war is him helping destroy it. Back on the Defiant, Kira's awake and explaining to Tommy Riker that she doesn't give 2 shits who he is, and that all he's managed to steal is a giant target painted on his back. He's called to the bridge to watch more Marquis ships arrive before setting a course for Cardigan space. Whatever his plan is, he's clearly aiming high. Just as well, then, that Sisko is already there to help stop him. He and Dukat are joined by someone called Coronus, a representative of the Obsidian Order. She wants to hear all about the Defiant's weapons, but he cuts her off to mention that it also has a cloaking device. This is something that she apparently already knew, though it would appear the Obsidian Order didn't bother sharing this information with the military. Still, the cloak might actually be of benefit. We know there's a way to detect it because Romulan Seska told us about it when we were playing hide-and-seek with Jem Hadar. If Tommy Riker doesn't know, we might be able to use it to surprise him. We're getting ready for shenanigans on the Defiant, both on the bridge and with Kira fiddling around in her makeshift cell. The activity of the former is noted on Cardassia as they've identified the Defiant. Curious thing though, it's not cloaked. That's because it's not really the Defiant, but a diversion, something Sisko can tell from warp wibblies. The real one is detected just before it decloaks and hits somewhere else along the border. It re-engages sneaky bastard mode once done and heads further into Cardigan space. Riker's figured out how they managed to spot the ship while cloaked and does a science to fix it, but that becomes irrelevant when a kaboom knocks it offline along with almost everything else. The source of the kaboom was Kira's fiddling in her cabin, and Tommy Riker stuck the ship into some handy space fog while they repair things, but he doesn't understand why Kira's resisting when they have the same enemy. She says it's because any escalation in the demilitarized zone will only result in more civilian deaths. Riker suggesting that won't happen because their encounters aren't in the demilitarized zone feels more than a little optimistic, but we'll leave that debate for another time, and they both go to the bridge so that she can't get up to any more tricks out of sight. It doesn't take long to repair things and they get underway again, albeit with a bit of damage that might make them detectable even while cloaked. Riker sets off for a shipyard and the decision confuses Kira. That's because Kira doesn't have all of the facts, and by facts we mean rumours and hearsay. Riker's heard the Cardigans are having a little internal politics problem, not the dissidents this time, but rather the opposite, as there are those who weren't happy with how the war with the Federation turned out, and want to have another go. According to these rumours, someone's building a fleet out here, and one that the Central Command of the Cardigan military doesn't know about. If it exists and they don't stop it, then Cardigan claims of innocence might not be heard over the sounds of Starfleet admirals calling for retaliation. Sisko's trying to figure out Riker's plan. He's been attacking bits and pieces all over the place, and the resulting movement of ships has left a system unguarded. Sounds dodgy, and Sisko convinces Descartes to send something there just in case. Or not, as Coronis takes issue. That particular, perfectly normal, uninhabited system is claimed by the Obsidian Order, and for no reason at all, she says any ship entering it will be destroyed, Federation or otherwise. That raises a lot of questions, and Descartes returns a little later with not many answers. Nobody in the military can get the Obsidian Order to explain themselves, and there's not much they can do about it. Cardigan society is set up to have the military and Obsidian Order be independent from each other, and both answering to a civilian leadership called the Detapa Council. That's the theory anyway, but Descartes implies it's largely for show. The political discussion is interrupted by a report. One of the patrol ships has detected something odd that might be coming from a cloaked ship, and they're just a short hop from the system we've identified. Riker, making a break for it, confirms Sisko's suspicions, but the Defiant is a nippy little bastard, so they can't be caught. Except that's not strictly true. They can't be caught by the ships chasing them, but the 3 new ships that just appeared in the system could do it. Odd thing, though, those ships aren't registered as part of the military, and that makes Descartes conclude they're from the Obsidian Order, which is something they're prohibited from doing. Those 3 ships change things. Riker could probably fight them off, but doing so would let the ones chasing him catch up, and even the Defiant isn't that good. The smart thing to do would be to leg it elsewhere and regroup. Unfortunately, that would also be the Starfleet thing to do, which is why Tommy Riker is choosing not to. Sisko's working a different angle. The Defiant has made it into the system Descartes wants to know about, and all that lovely sensor data makes a tempting trade. Finding out just what the Obsidian Order are getting up to, especially with the appearance of mystery ships, is worth far more to Descartes than the Defiant and some Marquis, but he needs someone to blame. Sisko thinks Riker might be willing to take one for the team as long as the sentence is life rather than death. Based on what we've learned about their penal system, I'm not convinced that life would be the preferable option. The Defiant is getting stuck in. Pooping abounds and many kabooms are kaboomed. As more ships appear in front of them, Riker receives a call. Being told they can surrender peacefully by Descartes sounds proper dodgy, obviously, but Sisko explains about the sensor logs. He also mentions that Riker being held responsible is part of the deal, but at least he won't be killed, probably. Kira weighs in to help persuade him by couching the idea as saving his crew, and Riker agrees. Being told to turn around and surrender to the ships behind him raises some eyebrows, but there's no time to explain. They leg it towards one of Ducat's ships, who promptly sticks a shield around them. Maybe the idea of firing on their own people stops the Obsidian Order ships, or maybe it's the fact that they're outnumbered 2-1. Either way, they decide to bugger off. All that's left is to fulfill our part of the deal. Riker turns over control of the ship to Kira after transmitting the sensor logs to our unexpected savior. Kira promises to rescue him, which is pretty bold considering how that all turned out for the last prisoner she helped free. Then he mashes his face into hers because he's still Riker and that's what he does. The Cardassian ship teleports him away, so we'll leave Kira to fly back to Deep Space Nine and Odo to presumably rub this little joyride in Eddington's face. Until the next adventure. More political dealings with the Cardassians then, only this time exploring the internal strife of their major organizations. The separation of military and espionage gives us the Central Command and Obsidian Order, each dedicated to their own side of the same coin, with the civilian Detapa Council making the choice of where to spend it. All well and good in theory, but the theory requires everybody involved to obey the rules. We've already had evidence that the Detapa Council is merely tolerated at best. The one time we know of the Council actually using its power, the withdrawal from Bajor, caused no small amount of resentment from the military and open defiance from some within it. Ducat's comments here suggest the Order views them with similar contempt. Their creation of a fleet shows just this, but it also indicates a struggle between the Central Command and Obsidian Order themselves. Each organization operates in isolation from each other and sometimes at odds, as we're shown here. And that potentially changes the whole purpose of the fleet in the first place. We're told the point of the fleet is to invade the Federation, but provoking another conflict would only serve to force the Detapa Council to provide more resources to the Central Command, essentially strengthening them. The Obsidian Order performing an action that results in more power being provided to the military makes no sense, but there's another option that does. An attack from this fleet doesn't just risk restarting a war. It would also have been a reason to go to the Detapa Council and argue that the Central Command are unfit for purpose. A fleet of ships did it after all, and everybody knows the Order doesn't have any ships, so there's only really one group that could be responsible: QED. With that in mind, this potential for a power grab might have been the real purpose of the fleet in the first place, hostilities with the Federation merely being collateral. In fact, those hostilities aren't even certain. We know that the Detapa Council is currently opposed to conflict, proven by the Federation Treaty and withdrawing from Bajor, so they might be willing to go to extreme lengths to avoid it. How extreme? Well, claims of innocence will be a lot easier to swallow if they're provided along with a handover of Central Command leaders to the Federation as proof that they were acting without authorization. Such a decision might even be welcomed by the civilian population, many of whom we know are already of the opinion that the military wields too much power. Now, I'm aware that I have a tendency to see things that aren't there and form connections that don't exist. Is this me just pulling plots out of my arse again to create a narrative that makes more sense than the one we were given? Of course, and I know we get a completely different explanation later, but having your own people essentially perform a coup d'etat of the military and hand it over to you is exactly the sort of thing that would be right up the Obsidian Order's alley. It's fun to think about these things. Just a couple of other bits to mention from this one then. Firstly, I assume we're supposed to conclude that the business between Tommy Riker and O'Brien was to get rid of him as quickly as possible. He and Billy Riker served together, so that makes him the most likely cause of being rumbled. Makes sense if you know the background, I suppose, but a narrative that needs you to do your own homework is a shit narrative. It's something we've discussed here previously, and my opinion on it remains unchanged. Call back to your current show as much as you want, but if you expect me to go and watch other things in the same franchise for context, you're fucked up. More frustrating is that we had a shot of O'Brien outside included, Kira popping out to ask him if he's okay, and him responding that he doesn't know what Riker was talking about would have only taken up a few more seconds. The other thing that bothered me is how we've had no mention of the Romulans. We've previously established the cloak is on loan and strictly observed by them. That we've had no whiff of that since is a disappointment. It also meant we didn't even touch on the potential political fallout of Sisko sharing a cloaking device flaw with the Cardigans, something that would likely leave the Romulans very unimpressed indeed. To be fair to the show, there's not a lot of space for Romulan politics in this one. We could have had a line about a new agreement in the last episode, though, when we took the Defiant into the Gamma Quadrant without a Romulan observer. Snipping 5 seconds out of that episode would not have been difficult at all. Before we go, let's have a callback to the Voyager reviews with a little whine about the number 47. DS9 certainly hasn't been clear of them, but this episode features 2 separate mentions in dialogue. My stance on that might have softened somewhat, now met with a resigned eye roll rather than active frustration, but it still feels like what it is, an indulgence on the part of the writers. Jamming a pair of them into an episode that's trying to be tense is counterproductive. They sit there like steaming turds in the middle of an otherwise pleasant dinner spread, and no amount of your Uncle Joe telling you that you don't have to eat them if you don't want to will change the fact that somebody you're sitting with chose to put shit on the table for their own amusement. End of episode.
Let's go with Vorta and Associates, shall we?
Why that one?
Well, the founders think we're all dicks, and the Jem'Hadar think we're all dicks and want to kill us.
I keep telling you it doesn't make any difference. They're all from the same contact.
Then we might as well have fun with it. Besides, maybe we're being psychologically profiled based on the one we chose.
They all came from the same account. It's literally just a template with names changed.
Alright then, it matters to me.
But why?
Because I'm trying to build a narrative. People watch this shite, you know.
It's mostly just the Patreon people to watch their names.
Yeah, and they give us money to do it. Don't shoot the bloody goose.
When you put it like that, giving careful consideration to who we contact might be more important than I thought. Woof.